Hey everyone, this is Viva, and this is going to be a quick guide on how to cut down songs for your AMVs. Usually when you see a song cut down on YouTube, the editor just faded out the song at the end. I think this makes the AMV feel incomplete, so this guide will show you how to cut down the song in the middle to make it feel like it's still one song and one cohesive project while still being shorter. For this guide, you're going to need Audacity, which I'll link in the description, tunebat.com, which I'll also link in the description, and then some editing program, it doesn't matter what. I use Sony Vegas. Okay, to start off, we need the BPM of your song. That's important. So we're going to use tunebat.com/analyzer for that. Go to that site, upload your song, and get the BPM. Okay, so here I have Audacity loaded up with the song that I want to cut down. There's a few tools that I'd like to go over. The cursor tool, which is selected by default, lets you click around to different parts of the song. You can zoom in and out with mouse wheel up and down. And also there's the, time shift tool that lets you slide the song around. Okay, so before you generate your rhythm track, this is really important. You probably have the audio track selected by default. You don't want to add the rhythm track to the audio track. You want to create it as a new track. To do that in Audacity, you have to click outside of the audio track. Okay, so after you clicked outside of the audio track, go to Generate Rhythm Track. Then there's a few options you're going to have to fill in. The BPM is something you just looked up. For me, it was 124. The beats per bar, I've never seen it as anything besides 4, so you can leave that. Number of bars set to 0. And then for rhythm track duration, set it to just something that's longer than your song. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to do 6 minutes because my song is like 5:45. Okay, so we'll press OK, and it'll generate the rhythm track for us. And you'll see that there's one big tick and then 3 small ticks. Each big tick represents a new measure, and each small tick represents a beat. Now what we have to do is we have to make sure that the rhythm track is lined up with our song properly. Usually there's a little bit of dead space at the beginning of a song, so probably you're going to have to slide the rhythm track forward a little bit. Okay, so the last thing to do before we export is to make sure that the ticks are properly lined up with the beats. And I like to scrub through the song and make sure that whenever a new big thing is introduced, that should be the beginning of a new measure. And I like to check in a few different spots to make sure that the rhythm track isn't getting out of sync. When you're satisfied that everything is lining up correctly, go ahead and delete the original audio track. You do that by pressing that little X on the upper left, and then File, Export as MP3. Now I'm in Sony Vegas, and I have the rhythm track and the original audio loaded in. Again, you're going to want to make sure that the rhythm track lines up perfectly with the audio. And once you've done that, you can just mute the rhythm track and use it as a visual aid from now on. Just a small note, when I'm actually editing, I find this metronome really, really helpful as well. It's really good to easily make sure you're cutting on the beat. I learned this technique from another YouTube tutorial that goes more in depth. I'll link that in the description below. So now we're doing the actual cutting, and I have to admit this is more of an art than a science, but the metronome is going to make your life a lot easier here. There's a really golden rule that you want to follow. Not only should you not cut in the middle of a measure, but you should actually treat every 4 measures as its own unit. And the reason for that is for music theory reasons. I'm not actually even sure why, but for some reason, especially in techno and pop, which is very formulaic, you're going to see everything clustered into 4 measures, and then things will repeat or go back to the original melody. And so for that reason, if you pick anywhere randomly in the song and you just cut out 4 measures, that is probably going to sound better than if you cut at any other point. And of course, you don't have to stop at 4. You can go to 8 or 16. Any, like, you know, the world is your fancy, but the point is that you should be cutting in multiples of 4. So if you're using Sony Vegas and you make a cut using S, then you'll see that there's a tiny little bit of fade in and fade out. I'm not sure why they do that. It's automatic. I would revert that every time you make a cut. Here I'm making the minimum cut of 4 measures. In Sony Vegas, what I like to do is I like to drag the cut part down to a muted track in case I change my mind and I want to add it back in later. Sometimes you'll find that it doesn't sound quite right. When it does, just adjust the in and the out a little bit, like make one a little bit longer and one a little bit shorter, and see if that fixes it. One thing you can experiment with is sometimes a straight hard cut doesn't work, just like in, you know, AMV editing, and it feels just a little bit too jarring. You can make it smoother by making it a crossfade instead of just a hard cut. Your mileage may vary. I usually like just to have the crossfade start in a beat before the measure ends and end a beat after the measure ends. A couple caveats. This method isn't going to work as well on things like classical music or post-rock as it does on pop and techno, because pop and techno are much more cookie cutter formulaic than classical music. Classical music is often not even done with a metronome or a DAW, right? So it's usually by feel, and so a metronome isn't even going to get your beats to line up properly. Okay, that wraps it up. I'll make the conclusion short and sweet. Of course, leave a comment if you have a question, and otherwise, let me know if this was helpful. Thanks, everyone.